Everyone can see the screen? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all for having me here today. I'll just move the boxes out of the way so I can see your faces still. There we go. Thank you all for having me here today. And my colleague Kirsten is going to jump on in a little bit. So if you see her come on and just start joining in with me, then I just wanted to let you know. But I want to do a little bit of a background on PACT and my organization that I started a long time ago, thanks to you all, really, and tell you a little bit about what we've been up to. And then I'm going to highlight a few resources that I've found useful for families specific to Black Lives Matters as well as COVID. And then at the end, I'd just like to open up the floor if anybody on Facebook Live has questions or anybody in the group wants to raise some questions or ask for some specific resources. Kirsten and I are nearly daily looking for things and trying to connect families to resources. So we probably have what you need if you've been looking for something or need support in some area. So just a quick background on who we are if you haven't met us. So I am a sibling of a 21-year-old wonderful young man with autism, and his name is Christopher. And I grew up in Cincinnati, was one of 4 siblings, and Christopher and I have a very strong relationship, and as I was growing up with him, came to be the one that kind of found a way to connect with him and help him speak. So he took a little while to speak, and found a way to advocate for him in schools, and that kind of got me interested in doing work with autistic individuals. And it's led to one thing after another. For a while I was working with Special Olympics, and then I did a teaching degree to begin with. I was a deaf education and special education teacher for a while because I had an interest in sign language. And then I had a lot of experiences with teachers just not quite knowing what to do with their students with autism and not having the skills and support. So I went back to school and did an educational psychology PhD and focused on autism research. And so that's kind of been my journey. And I share my time between Kentucky and Australia right now. Since COVID, I've been more in Australia. As we were chatting about earlier, our country's done a little bit of a better job, to say the least. And so I've been here I've got 2 boys, a 3-year-old, as of this weekend, a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old boy. So that's a little background on me, and I'll let Kirsten introduce herself when she hops on. But I just wanted to start with an update about my organization. And so for those of you that don't know, our roots are with the Autism Society of the Bluegrass. Back a long time ago, it was about probably 8 or 9 years ago, I worked with a family, Susanna Williams, who's a member of Autism Society for the Bluegrass, and whose son is George. So he's next to Jay in the gray sweatshirt, and worked with Mel, and we started talking about what we can do about training the police in Lexington. Really, we were being proactive. We were seeing things happening on the news. It was right around the time when the incident in Florida happened, and we thought, okay, Kentucky hasn't messed up yet. Kentucky's been pretty good. We've had great relationships so far with the police, but let's make sure we've educated Lexington police to start with and see what happens. So we approached the chief at the time, and had a wonderful response from the chief and able to deliver a training. A little bit of the funny part was that they provided us with 15 minutes to train their whole department about autism, the first go around. So we did a little bit of a shock treatment. I'm not sure if you remember, Mel, but we did a bit of a shock treatment and made them want us to come back. So basically gave them so much information that they said we needed to come back, and we did a 2-hour training for their department following that. And then PACT was born. So we started being asked to go to other departments throughout Kentucky, and we needed a name. We had some wonderful news coverage that helped spread what we were doing. And we really focused on the training, but then also something we called a meet and greet. And that was where we asked, after we trained police officers, we asked them to come into community center like a library or a park and interact with our community. So that it wasn't just about training that this is autism and it's something in the books, that these are your community members and this is who we want you to get to know. So we've since moved across the world doing trainings, and we're really thankful to Autism Society of the Bluegrass for helping us get our start. So what we do now, so we originally just started on training first responders, but we also train schools. So we spent nearly a year of our time training schools around Lexington as well. And now we offer trainings to schools as well. We conduct research. So Kirsten and I have both since graduated with our PhDs. Kirsten's a school psychologist and an educational psychologist, and we work with quite a few other researchers that are a part of PACT. And then we disseminate materials, and that's our main goal right now. So anytime something comes up, we do our best to grab all the materials that other people have made and make materials ourselves and share and support as much as we can. So this just talks about kind of our journey that we've been on. So again, we started with just that conversation where we thought, let's see what Lexington's police chief has to say about what he knows about autism, how he wants to support individuals with autism. Let's see what he knows and how much he's willing to take from us. And he was amazing and open and kind of allowed us to do a lot of training, a lot of work with Lexington. So then we did that 15-minute training, and we've, I need to update these numbers. These are last year's numbers, so we probably have about 500 more to add to these numbers. And then again, we've moved across the world as well. Since I've been connected to Australia, and we have partners in the United Kingdom as well that share our materials. We really believe that part of the success of PACT is that we don't only train the first responders, but we do those meet and greets. We think that that's key, and we right
hey,
now
Abby,
are, yes.
we have a question from Facebook, and the question
Absolutely.
is, who was this Chief Weathers?
To begin with, no, it was not. It was, you're going to date me. I'm going to look it up while I keep talking. It wasn't to begin with, though. I have done some work with him. I'll get it for you.
Okay.
Do you remember Mel? Are you on there, Mel?
Yeah, I think it was Chief Beatty.
Yes, I think you're right. Yep. Thanks, Mel. Your memory's better than mine. We have done a little bit of work with Chief Weathers, though. All right, so some other work that since the last time we talked to you all, we might not have been able to update you on, is that we also spent a year partnering with Kentucky Autism Training Center. So as we were busy doing our work and kind of had our heads down training as many counties as we could in Kentucky, we got wind of Kentucky Autism Training Center doing the same in their circle. So since they're based in Louisville, they were doing a lot of the counties around Louisville, and we were busy doing the counties in Eastern Kentucky. And we approached them about partnering so that we could be covering more ground and sharing the same materials. And so we did a year with them on a state grant that allowed us just to, like I said, share materials. We put our trainings together to make sure we were training the same thing. We learned from each other's techniques, and because they have a lot more financial resources too, that we were able to cover a lot of ground in that year. We've published for academic manuscripts, so we've written about a lot of things, and we're about to post those on PACT's website, so stay tuned within the week or so. We've written some summary papers as well, so that you don't have to read the boring academic version. But we've written I guess 2 articles that were more about stories, experiences of autistic families and autistic individuals, as well as police officers. And then we've written a couple articles about our trainings as well. So I'll let ASBG know when that comes up, and you can have a look at those articles. We're working on a really exciting video campaign that's been a long time. There's a group in California that's a nonprofit group that works with nonprofits that helps to create video campaigns for them. So they work completely on a volunteer basis, and you can put a proposal in for your group, and then they can help you create a really high quality video that will share whatever message you're trying to share. And so I've been working with them for a few years now, and we had a little pause as I got a new designer, but it should be released in the next month or two, and it's called Ought to Know. So it plays on the autism AUT and just talks about why first responders should know about autism and what you ought to know about autism. So stay tuned for that. That's an exciting project we've got going on. And then the last big project we're doing is we're working on an international policy brief about criminal justice professionals and autism community. So at one of the international conferences, academic conferences last year, it was decided that this was such a big issue that we needed a policy brief so that we could inform how policy should change and what we can do in a federal way. So we've been working on that. We have people from all of the nations are represented, and we've been sitting down. We have monthly meetings where we just talk about what research is saying, and we're putting together this brief that'll come out next year. And so that'll just summarize what we know, what we need to know, and what policy needs to change immediately to support the autism community. All right, I'll just pause there for a second. The next part of what I'm going to talk about is just more about some resources. I think I want to start by just saying well done to everybody that's gotten this far in this very tricky year that we've had. I am supporting people from afar, but I'm not living with someone with autism, and I just want to take my hat off to you, because I know that you know, the structure and routine that is so vital to so many of our young individuals and adults, it's gone away. And I just really I want to say well done to all of you that have found ways to make it work and found structure and been able to you know, stay afloat during this time, because I really believe that this has been one of the trickiest times, especially for the autism community. One of the things that we really are trying to push when we talk to families as far as resources and strategies goes, and we're happy to talk about any of these things in more detail with you afterwards if you've got questions. But one of the main messages we want to get across is think about an emergency plan if you haven't done so already. So this is the thought of who would stay with your child or young adult or older adult if you did have to become quarantined or if you were hospitalized. And so, for example, with my brother, I've talked through plans with my parents about who would be the first person they called, and have they talked about Christopher is my brother, have they talked to Christopher about that as well? So we believe it's important not only to do that plan for care, but also to communicate that information to your loved one as well, so that it's not a surprise and a shock and a life-changing thing. When it does happen, it's something that they've been talked to about already. So for example, my brother has a script that he has just kind of sitting near his bedroom chest that he can see at night that says, if mom or dad were to get sick, this is what would happen. And again, we don't talk about it all the time because my brother has high anxiety about that type of thing, but we do just let him know there is a plan and you would be okay. And we do, you know, we have it ready. So we find that that's really important in my family, and thinking about a place to write it down and sharing it as well. So once my family had that plan written up, they shared it around with quite a few people, so that again, if they were in the experience or in that circumstance where things had to happen quickly, there were other people that could also put that plan into motion. And I think it's good to think through this kind of thing ahead of time as well, because there's so many little details that are part of this plan for your autistic loved one that would not come to mind right away. So when you'd be thinking, okay, I've got to be quarantined or I've got to go to the hospital, you wouldn't think about the detail about how Christopher has to do these 5 things in the morning or his whole day is gone. You don't think about those details about how his favorite shirt is this one and it's the one without the tag. You know, all those little things that become part of your day to day when you're living with someone with autism. If you take the time to write them down and think about an emergency plan and again share it with somebody else, you'll just have that peace of mind, and you'll know that there is somebody in behind the scenes that'll be ready to help. The last point on this page just says that the plan can have pictures with names of people as well. And you know, part of my work, I've done work in a lot of different areas. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of my trainings have to do with educating first responders, but a lot of my work has to go, is for advocating for visual supports. So that last bit about the pictures is definitely something that I think is important, having some sort of visual support, whether it's pictures, whether it's symbols, where we're just, again, simply communicating something to our loved one with autism, because if we were need to put this emergency plan into action, it would be a high stress time. And we know when stress goes up, autism symptoms can go up. And so having something simple and ready to go can give you that peace of mind. So social stories, part of our work has always been to kind of grab the best social stories we can find, especially when something new comes up. So when the coronavirus came up, we made a few, we grabbed a few from other people, and we always post them on our website. So if I didn't highlight it earlier, our website is packedautism.com. And you can see some of those highlighted. Now, we haven't put everything up, but again, I think social stories are just really crucial during this time. And even if you haven't used them before, it's a good way to calmly teach those really basic things like washing hands if you need to be working on that, putting hand sanitizer on, wearing a mask, explaining what coronavirus is, explaining that your schedule is going to be different. And one thing that we do for families a lot, which we're more than happy to do for anybody that wants it or anybody in your group that needs the support, is we give you the social story in editable form. So when you see them off our website, they're just PDFs because that's the easiest way to share them. But if anybody wants it in the PowerPoint version, so they can quickly just put their son or daughter's name in it, or quickly make adjustments that say, you know, where they live or something like that. Because we do know when we see an individualized social story as opposed to just you know, one that everybody reads, that they work a little bit better. So we're more than happy to do that. So it's just a quick email to me, and I can send you that editable version so you can make it a little bit more individualized. But again, it's giving the importance of a social story or a visual support during this time when everything else is different and everything else is out of whack, and you know, everybody's home, but wait, mom and dad are supposed to be at work and I'm supposed to be at school, and everything is just a little bit crazy. It gives that hard copy of something that doesn't change. This is what's going on. This is what I need to do. Here's the steps involved. And it just gives that structure and that calm when everything else is a little bit crazy. And we've got great resources and great evidence around social stories and visual supports too, that just, you know, a lot of voices from autistic adults that will say, having something that I can refer back to that's not going to change is calming to me, especially in a time when things are not. So know that these resources are there. If you need a social story or a visual support, you ever need a social story or visual support for something that you don't see on there, again, please reach out. That's something that my team does all the time for people, and more than happy to help or support. All right, our last kind of big tip about coronavirus supports and what you can do to think about how you can kind of bring that calm and lower that anxiety from not having structure is put in a structure at home. So if you haven't done this, we highly recommend making sure that there's a structure in place at home. And it doesn't mean that there has to be something planned all day, but it just means that when your loved one wakes up, there's a schedule somewhere and it's followed loosely. And it allows them to fall into a routine the same way they would fall into a routine if they were going to school every day or going to work every day. And it kind of mocks that nice routine that allows a lot of our individuals to just feel, take a breath and feel that calm. And so, your schedule can include exercise, it can include some free time, it can include some walking outside or doing chores, it can include work tasks, it can have a spot on it that says work. My brother has even though where he was working is not open anymore, he's got a hour in his day that says work, and he does a certain task around the house that he sees as work. So just having that daily routine and structure, and then not changing it too much if you can. So making sure that looks the same as many days of the week as possible. And again, put it up. So don't underestimate the power of having a schedule up and ready to go every day. So try it for a couple weeks and just see if you see a change in that behavior, because you'll start to notice that they know what to expect, and they know what's going to happen next. And I think if you haven't ever used schedules, I've got some resources for you if you haven't done that at home. My advice always is to start with 2 things. So you start with what we call a now next schedule, so a now next board, where you would just have 2 things. Right now we're eating, and next we're going on a walk. And then when those things are done, it's right now we're going on a walk, and next we're going to clean your room. Well, right now we're going to take a shower, next we're going to brush our teeth. And once your child learns the predictability of something like that, then you're able to work in a longer schedule and a bit more structure. So doing a now next is structure as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be a 10-point schedule that's written. You can individualize it for what's best for your child. But again, I'm more than happy to help and support you on an individual basis with this. So if this is something you haven't done at home yet, just reach out to me. And I've got the support of a large team of people that work with me with PACT. Kirsten and I are kind of the leads right now, but we've got lots of people we can call on if I don't have the answers, or if I can't help you specifically. So please feel free to reach out if you need some more specific help on any of these things. So another tip that comes from a lot of the resources that we've gathered with COVID and how we can support our loved one is about controlling the environment. So again, this is easy. All these things, and again, growing up with a sibling with autism, growing up in a big family, I know that this is easier said than done, but trying to create different activity zones in your house. So if you do want your loved one to be doing something that was more like academic work, having a place for that, having a place where we're going to do things like sensory play, having a place where we're going to do more relaxation type things, having a place where we're going to watch TV and have our screens out. And again, absolutely understand that this is easier said than done, especially when everybody is home. And you might have lots of other factors playing into what would normally be going on in your house. But even just little corners of your house where things like this happen, and again, you'll see your child start to understand, or your loved ones start to understand that, okay, this happens here, and I do this here, and it's giving that calming structure when we've got chaos kind of around us, which is something that we've got in our world right now. We've got a bit of chaos going around. Using visual strategies to increase motivation and provide rewards. So we've got some pictures of that on this slide, where we just talk about helping individuals understand that they can work for something like time on their iPad. And by work, it doesn't mean they're going to sit and do hours and hours of labor, but it might mean that they pick up 5 toys and then do some more iPad, or it might mean that they walk around the block once and then get to hop back on the iPad. So it's definitely a adjustable day-to-day thing, but just knowing that a visual support like this that'll help with motivation and providing rewards is an easy thing to create. And you know, these ones are very pretty. They're cut nicely, and it doesn't have to look like that. It could be something written on a piece of paper with X's every time they do some work. It doesn't have to be, you know, well designed some piece of work. So just know that anything like that can be helpful. The one key that research has told us about these rewards and strategies is that you've got to individualize it. So make sure when you think about what that child's going to be working for, or that young adult's going to be working for, make sure that's something that they care about. Otherwise, you're not going to get those 5 things that you have to get before. So make sure that's something they choose. So whether that's a preferred food, or a preferred game on their iPad or something like that. And then the last key to getting those to work is just to make sure that whatever they're working towards, they do only get when they've achieved those 5 things. So whatever those 5 things need to be, make sure you're working on just passing those, you know, giving that iPad time, or giving those Cheerios or that special drink after they've done those kind of 5 things. And again, I think I would just, in a time like this where we're in COVID, I think I would just see it as, what do I need to get done that's not, what do I want my child or my young adult to get done that they're not getting done in a day? So like exercise comes to mind right away. So if exercise is something that you're having trouble doing at home, then make it about exercise. Make it about those kind of most critical things. And then you hold on to that wanted item. So whether it's an iPad or whether it's special TV time or something like that, until they've done those 5 things. And usually we do like to prepare families that if this is the first time you're using something like this, you do see a spike in tricky behavior and challenging behavior before you see that good understanding and clear, relaxing, calm with it. So hang in there with something like this. But again, reach out if you need any support, and I'm happy to share ideas or help you with resources. The next bullet just talks about setting limits. So set limits on technology. And again, I want to say that I'm not suggesting you you know, have to have this hard structure that's really exhausting to follow in your day. It just means that if you've got some sort of limit on something that you know they love, so something like an iPad or TV time, you're just able to work in those other things that your young adult or your child is more than happy to do. So for example, they would normally get up for school and go to school, or they would normally go on a walk, but because times are so crazy, it's very hard to get them to do something like that. Limiting with a timer and having breaks worked into your day can make it go much easier, but we've got to have that kind of structure in place. And there's these timers that you can see in the bottom corner that are usually really successful because they've got that visual point. So you can look an app up, and an app has one just like that. I can share that app with you if you need it, but they can be very successful in just making it clear. There's a beginning and end to this, and then we're going to check your schedule and see what's next. And maybe what's next is only going to last 5 minutes, and then they can go back to that thing that they want to do. But again, just putting some structure in place helps bring that calm, lower that behavior that you might be seeing that's challenging, and help them feel like something's a bit normal again, like they would have that structure at school normally or work. So there's some more information. There's a link. I'll be sharing this with everybody afterwards. So there's a link here that just talks about technology. All right, so daily movement and exercise. There's some great apps. This is called the Exercise Buddy. I personally haven't used this one, but I've shared it with lots of families, and Kirsten has shared it with quite a few families as well, where you can just add different exercises. So there's a column that allows you to browse, so you can find exercises that are really useful, and then you pull them across and set a timer to it. It's very neat app. So if you haven't used it before, I highly recommend it. And the way I've suggested my brother and my family use this app is that they've got it written into the schedule. So they've got it on the schedule 5 times a day. And instead of saying exercise 5 times a day, they've just got the Exercise Buddy app. So he checks his app and then gets to, was that a question? Sorry. No, I just heard some feedback. I thought it might have been a question. And then he gets to check his app, and a couple exercises will be up that many times a day, and he does those exercises, and it allows him to just have that worked into his day and make it very clear because it's in a visual form. So really great app, highly recommend. And again, if you don't choose to use the app, just promoting that daily exercise, no matter if it's a walk around the block, if that's feasible for you, if that's possible and help, able to do within, if it's got to be an inside exercise or on a treadmill or something like that, but just working that in as best you can. Continue working towards goals. So, this is definitely something that may or may not be possible, depending on, what your specific county is looking like or what's going on with you in your area. And I can imagine that this is part of the hardest part of COVID, is that you had service providers that you might not be able to have, you were seeing them weekly and now you're not able to see them at all. But part of what Kirsten does, so Kirsten, when she hops on here in a little bit, if she's able to join us, is a lot of telehealth work. So she's a school psychologist and is working with a lot of providers to do telehealth. And, if your provider doesn't do telehealth, you might be able to get support. And we just really recommend, even if in your mind you're thinking, there's no way telehealth's going to work for me and my child, that they're not going to sit and do therapy visually. It can be as much of a support for you as it can be for your child or for your loved one. So even if it's a scenario that you think won't work for them, it can be a chance for you to say, these are the problems we're having now that COVID's here. Can you help me think about some strategies, or can we check in about this every week, so that I can get some help and some support in this area. Often some of the providers will do calls with you and walk through the goals that they were working on. So this is something we suggest you ask. So as opposed to just calling and just talking about the things you struggled with, ask them, what were the goals? Can you remind me the goals that you were working on with my child? So this could be educators, this could be speech therapists, this could be occupational therapists, but just calling and getting a bank of those goals, and so that the goals that their child was working on, and ask them for strategies about how to keep working those things into your day-to-day, and get support through them. So if they're not able to do telehealth, ask them who is, and make sure that you're getting that kind of provider support that you were getting before. And again, I know it's not the same as being able to go into an office and have a loved therapist work with your child on a weekly basis, but it is better than nothing, and it will give you that chance to talk to somebody that understands autism and also understands your child. I highly recommend reaching out to people in your network. So don't do this alone. So this is why that groups like this are so important. Just to have talks every once in a while and say, this is really hard. This is really challenging, and ask other people what they're struggling with, so that when you hear they're struggling with similar things, it can help give you that peace of mind that you're not just the only one doing this wrong, and everybody else is, doing this without any problems. So reach out to people in your network, and I really highly recommend reaching out to people in an autism network. So I think it's critical that you're not just talking to family and friends that don't have experience with autism, because your experience as a family member of somebody with autism during COVID is unique. And I think that it's critical that you are able to get support during this time and talk to somebody else that is going through something similar. So again, groups like this, there's great Facebook groups as well that you can engage in, where you can just say, this is what happened last night. Does anybody else have things like this that happened to me? So that, again, you're not feeling alone during this really tricky times. And also it's a great chance to share resources. So if you're looking for telehealth options or online learning options that have worked, no doubt somebody else in that group is also looking for those things, and may have already found some awesome ones. So, reaching out to groups and saying, has anybody found one? Or, does anybody have a 7-year-old that struggles with this and has found something online that works for them, and, sharing resources that way. So again, I just suggest you do this regardless of whether you feel you need to, because you'll get that regular support before you need it. And then this is just reiterating that fact that you've got to take care of yourself as well. So a lot of my strategies is about how we're encouraging exercise and using visual supports, and making sure we've got structure and routine, but that goes for yourself as well, because I can imagine that that's one of the first things that you've had a lot of trouble doing during this time, taking care of yourself and getting your own support. So making sure you've got that online support group, or talking to ASBG members, and using the wealth of information that the members have. There's some information I'll be sharing on here about managing stress. The American Psychological Association has put out a great post. So I'll share this with you, where you can look at that. And there's a great podcast as well about specifically about speaking to individuals with disability there. I just saw Kirsten hop on. Hi, Kirsten. I'll let you pop in a minute and just talk about where you've been, but I'll just finish for now. And then there's some crisis lines. So again, I'll email this out to everybody afterwards. But if you don't find the right resource, again, please reach out, because somebody in my circle or Kirsten's circle or one of our circles probably knows that's where that resource would be. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, so we've just got this toolkit. Kirsten, can I put you on the spot? Do you want to talk through this toolkit? Because I know this was one of your resources.
Yeah, I can talk through this a little bit. Thanks for letting us join, everyone. Sorry, I was on another call, so sorry for joining late. But this is a resource from UNC Chapel Hill, the Frank Porter Graham Center, FPG, and they did, I think it was within like a week of basically schools being closed, they developed this toolkit. And you can see I just kind of took some screenshots from their website, but they have a variety of tools. If you go back,
Right.
you're fine.
Yeah, sorry.
You're good. So they basically talk about kind of how to support understanding of coronavirus, and a lot of the things that we talked about throughout the talk today that Abby talked about are included in here too, but how to offer opportunities for expression. So how to really work on promoting language and communication. Some of those, how to prioritize coping and calming strategies. And I'm sure that you guys, if you've been cooped up in the house like most of us, you probably had to been working through this with some of your kids. So it's a good time to really practice that in vivo style and model that for your kids, and practice it with them. So they have some tips there. Also, again, on maintaining routines and kind of building new routines. In addition to just kind of getting stuck in the habit of what we're doing on a daily basis, it's a good opportunity to build new routines, and to kind of at least incorporate some new activities into your daily life. How to foster connections from a distance. And so I thought that was actually a unique one I hadn't seen in many other resources. So how to encourage your children and your families to foster connections even from a distance. And they have some strategies for adults with autism in there as well. And then being aware of challenge of like changing behaviors. So a lot of the kids that I'm working with, and I'll talk about it a little bit where I've been, are experiencing new behaviors, new challenging behaviors due to the stressful time. And so they're talking about how to manage changing behaviors, new behaviors, some of those that might have intensified. I have some other kids I work with that honestly don't have many new behaviors because they get access to iPad all the time, where they get to do what they want. They're not, sometimes school is triggering those behaviors. So there's the section on that, and then an overview of adult resources. And then what's cool is they have, I think, like 8 to 10 different languages that this toolkit is available in. So if you're working with families, or you're connected to families that speak different languages, they have translations. So that's a really good resource, so check it out. And again, if anyone has any questions, like Abby said, I'm happy to find some other resources as well.
All right, so we've just got a few more helpful websites on here. Do you want to talk through these, Kirsten? Yeah.
So when I've been working with families doing like parent support, these are the main 4 that we really go to, or main 3, and then I threw in the KATC one since it's Kentucky. But Autism Speaks has a lot of different resources, as always, and they also have an adult section. And again, like Abby's talked about, it's not just adults. It's not just for kids with autism, but also for families. I think it's really important to care for yourself, and hopefully you're doing that by taking part of this work or the support group. But this is another way for you to make sure you're taking care of yourself. They have some really good lessons on that. And then this Adept interactive learning platform I thought was really neat because it's free and it's an interactive self-paced kind of online module where you can teach your kid functional skills. So they have a variety of different skills. It's from the UC Davis Mind Institute, and so a lot of good work and research coming out of there. So that one is really good as well. And then there's that Chapel Hill one that I just talked about. And then KATC in Kentucky has their own as well, but I just thought I might include that in case people, were looking for Kentucky specific resources. Yeah, so that's a quick overview of those. I think that's it, Abby, that I have. Do you have anything else to add?
No, that's good. That's good. So we'll just pause for a minute, and I think before we get into a little bit of our Black Lives Matters resources, Kirsten, I might let you just talk. I talked a little bit in the beginning about how you and I were at UK together, and I talked about our journey with PACT. But I think, my resources and, my work is a lot in research right now, but I think a lot of ASBG members might find it interesting what you're doing and possibly how you can, connect them with things. So do you want to just chat briefly about what you're up to?
Yeah, so I just finished on Friday my PhD at UK, so kind of exciting news in the midst of the pandemic. Thanks, Abby. So I graduated in school psychology, but I'm working in a clinical psychology setting at Marcus Autism Center. It's affiliated with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and the Emory School of Medicine, and so it's kind of this joint place where we work not only with like residents who are training in the medical school, but we're also working with families and children through CHOA, the healthcare, the hospital, the big hospital here. So I work in the assessment clinic, and so we're diagnosing and assessing any kids anywhere from 14 months all the way up to 21 years old. And then we also do a lot of research studies as well. So that's been a really good experience. We've gone telehealth, I guess, middle of March. And then, so I'm doing a lot of telehealth assessment as well. So I know Abby talked a little bit earlier about what telehealth, that your providers might be doing telehealth. Some providers are also doing telehealth assessment, especially if your kid already has a diagnosis of autism. It's a lot easier if you need an update for benefits or something. I've been doing some of those evals. So hopefully you guys could find a place in Kentucky or elsewhere. Feel free to reach out if you have questions about that, but it is possible. And then in addition to that, I do some different interventions through Emory. So we have an autism anxiety clinic, which is really unique. And a lot of the anxiety treatments are kind of more generalized for anxiety, but I think when someone has autism, it poses a unique challenge, an opportunity as well, where you can kind of focus on some strategies that might be more visual, and use some strategies that really work well with people with autism. So I'm working there. And then also in an early intervention clinic using Project Impact. So teaching parents how to promote their kids' social communication skills. So that's all to say. Trying to figure out what I'm going to be doing in the future, but I kind of dabble in a variety of things, and working with Abby in PACT has been really good. If you guys have any questions for providers or kind of therapy or assessment questions, I'm happy to answer. If I don't know, I'm happy to look further into it. But thanks again for having us. We're excited to be here and be with you guys.
Thanks, Kirsten.
Yeah.
So the last bit that we wanted to cover was just a couple resources with Black Lives Matters and the protests and things that have been going on. Again, like I mentioned earlier, what we do is we, excuse me, we train officers and we train first responders, but we also really believe in, supporting the autism community as best we can. And in anything that's dramatic across the world. So we did our coronavirus resources. We've also done some Black Lives Matters resources because, you know, from the viewpoint of an autistic individual, this is something that's drastically changed. This is a language that they're going to be hearing a lot more. This is things they're going to be seeing a lot more. What is a protest? How do I understand what a protest is? Is this something, you know, what's going on with the police? Do I trust police? You know, a lot of our work, it's very interesting how our work is intersecting now with what's going on right now, because you know, a lot of our work is not only in how can I support police officers and first responders in working with our autism community, but also how our autism community can work with police. So if you go to our website, you'll see that we've got resources for both ways. So, you know, teaching individuals with autism and doing that work ahead of time. And I'm happy to, for those of you that don't know that side of my work, I'm happy to send you some information, but it basically involves, you know, making sure you're practicing things like personal information with everybody, every autistic family member you've got, and making sure they're able to give that personal information to police, making sure they know how they can talk to a police officer. But, you know, right now in the middle of Black Lives Matters, it also means making sure that they understand how to be safe around the police and how critically important that is. And this is for all people, but this is especially for our Black autistic individuals as well, and making sure that they understand the critical importance of listening to police, of not running away, and of keeping their body safe. And a lot of the resources that we've shared on PAC's website just highlight that. And again, I really would recommend asking us for the editable versions if you take one of these resources and decide to use it for your loved one, and making it editable so that they, you know, you can add parts to it that are specific to what's happening in your town. You know, if there's a discussion about taking down a statue, you know, put that in. If there's a discussion about, you know, certain protest or a certain riot, or if more violence is going on in your area and you want to talk a little bit more about that, add that in. But I think it's critical that we talk about this to our loved ones, and you know, we know that they've got very acute ears and very acute hearing, and they're going to hear this whether it's on the news or whether it's on the radio, whether talking to family, or just see that increased anxiety in their family members. So using this language and making sure they're, you know, reading social stories and we're giving them the language around what's going on is really critical. But again, with that as well, there's the safety with the police that we think, you know, if you haven't done work with your child, then this should be your summer work. It should be working on safety with the police. And again, this is for every autistic family member that you've got, but especially for our Black autistic community members as well, and family members, because we think you know, we know that's critical, and that's just the world that we're in right now, and that's where we're at. We've got to teach safety around police. And so if you haven't done any work with your child or with your loved one about police, this could be your educational module for the summer. You could be teaching things like you know, making sure you're remembering personal information and then giving them authentic practice. So that could be calling the police station. You can do this during COVID, calling police station and saying, can you please have an officer come to my house and knock on my door and ask my child their personal information? So it doesn't, you know, you can do it safely. You can have them meet your loved one on the street and ask them for information. And again, one of the things that Kirsten and I are always pushing is make sure, you know, you tell your police department about your loved one. I've got to, you know, I do this for my brother in his community, and my brother's a higher functioning, chatty Kathy that would talk to any police officer that came up to him, but I still want them to know that he's living in their town, and that he might have these challenges, and here's how you can help him, and here's how you can get him support.
I want to add that too, because I think there's something, I know we've talked about this before, the whole idea of introducing your child to the police. We're working on a form, and I'm working on it. I give it to a lot of families I work with now, where you can actually take it to your police precinct. And so hopefully we'll have that available on PAC as well. I know, Abby, we've talked about that before, but I think that might be helpful. But even if it's a makeshift one that you do, right? Like your kid's name, a picture, maybe some triggers, some calming strategies that might work, how they communicate, those types of things. And when I work with my families and give a diagnosis, especially like Abby's saying, to Black autistic children and adolescents, I think it's really important that you talk to them about, making sure that's documented with your police, especially if your child is an eloper and runs away. There's been a lot of stories about children not being safe because of something like that. And so having the police have that information can be really helpful. And so feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in getting that kind of sheet that you can take to the police. But sorry to interrupt. That was just something I thought.
No, that's great. Yeah, really good. Thank you. Interrupt anytime. We can't enforce this enough that really you've got to let the police know that you're living in the community. And one of the things I advise to parents too is you let them know regularly. So this is not a one-time thing you've done. Police turnover is just like teacher turnover. Families move all the time. So you've got to do it again and again and again. Chiefs change, and it's just critical that you do, inform the police about your child and have them interacting as much as possible. I've facilitated a lot of relationships between families and police officers where I'll just have a police officer regularly stop by for a family too. So all these things you can ask of your police department so that you're doing this work before there's an emergency. And that's what PACT has always pushed. Please do this work before an emergency. Do it before there's an issue. A lot of my work started because I was involved with ASBG, and I was involved with Susanna and George and her son, who is nonverbal and uses an iPad to communicate. And if you don't know him, you wouldn't necessarily be able to communicate. So Susanna and I had a lot of conversations about George and what he would do with police. But it really started because my brother had a very scary interaction with the police. He loves dressing up in army clothes, and he loves pretending that he's in the army. And so he was doing that when he was a teenager at one point, and he had a Nerf gun that was wrapped in duct tape, and he was just pretending at a park in a community, and a community member saw him and mistook his behavior as something that would be dangerous, and police were called. And my mom being there is the reason we think we were able to defuse it. Well, we know we were able to defuse it because she was there quickly to say, he's got autism. This is what he likes to do. It's not a real gun. And she was able to talk to, what was key was she was able to talk to Christopher and explain, Christopher, you need to do what the police say. You need to show them your gun. You need to come with them. Because otherwise Christopher wouldn't necessarily have seen the authority and understood the importance of that situation and safety during that situation. Since then, we've done a lot of work with him. And we've just seen incredible work with a lot of our families that have worked with us from the beginning. So again, I would suggest if you haven't started this, start it now and do it regularly. George is another one of those success stories Susanna can share with you. She's in ASBG's email listserv, and she'd be happy to talk to any families too. But she would tell you that at the beginning of our work, back when we started this, George wouldn't go anywhere near anybody that he didn't know. Now, anytime he sees a police officer, he says hello, he'll walk up to them, and he really understands that friendly support relationship. And again, I know that that's tricky to say right now during this time, and I recognize that challenge also that our Black autistic community members have as well. But hopefully some of these resources will help and support and do a little part at least. And again, we put up on PACT's website the ones that we think are kind of the best, but there are others. So if you don't see something there and you think you need some language around something, reach out and one of us can help. There's just a few more of what we've got. Just again, information around protests. So I just can't underestimate, make sure you're giving language to your loved ones during this time about these things. So, we're able to pick up quickly because we talk about it a lot with our friends and family. We're reading the news, but the idea of protests and why are people yelling and why are people shouting and why are people angry? That's just something you're going to have to talk through. That's not going to be something that's going to come naturally and be understood easily by your loved one. And so it's going to be important that you've got something like a social story or a visual support just to explain this is what's happening and this is why.
I don't mind talking through these if you want, Abby.
Yep.
And so like along the lines of everything Abby was saying, I think it's really important to kind of, for everyone to be focusing on this anti-racist and work and to understand, especially in support of our Black autistic lives, because I think, again, it's something that even as white allies, we need to be thinking about and talking about. So we kind of put together a list of these comprehensive resources for all ages. And so the first two are ones from the American Psychological Association. There's a lot of different resources, from online resources to books. I put on the second one, it's an online reading of the book, Something Happened in Our Town. And so if you guys haven't heard about that book, it's a really good book. And I know that resources are hard to come by. A lot of these books are sold out, or families might not have financial resources to pay for some of these books. So that's a free reading. They actually show you the book and the video and read it. So you could even watch that video and then have a conversation about it. I think it's a really good start. And then there's a third one. The third link is basically understanding systemic racism. And so again, you're going to have to kind of think about the skill level and the understanding of your loved one. And if you need help with that, reach out to Abby and myself. But this is an animated video thinking about systemic racism. I have some kids I work with at adolescents that ask a lot of questions about this. So we've watched this together and we've talked about it and sparked conversation. There's also a race conscious parenting collective for any parents that are interested in having these ongoing conversations about race and how do you talk to your kid about race. And again, I think a lot of times we think about that, oh, well, Black families are the only ones that need to talk about race with their kids. You know, a lot of times white people in general, we don't talk about race, or it's kind of the absence of race. And so I think this is a really good place to go as a white parent, even if you're like, how do I talk about race with my child? I know some kids that I've worked with, they just call it like they see it, and they say things that are very literal. Some kids that I've worked with have been like, commented on how, oh, he's in a wheelchair, or having statements that they don't necessarily know might be racist that they're saying out loud. But how do you talk to your child about understanding what's appropriate, not appropriate to say? Here's a place you can go to kind of talk about this. And they're having online meetings right now, which is a really good start, and I think good for parents. And then there's another video where Black parents explain to their children how to interact with police. So it's real life interviews with Black families and how they're talking to their children about police. They're very young children on there. So if you haven't really thought about this and you are Black and your loved one is Black, then start there. But I think it's also, again, really important that white people and white families engage in this work, because this is a collective movement. And I think, really teaching your child to be an ally is really important, and not just kind of putting on the works of people of color, putting that work in their hands for them to do. So we kind of wanted to put a variety of resources together for people. So that's kind of an overview. And again, reach out if you have any questions, or if you see any good resources that we don't have. I love sharing resources and gathering them, so please reach out.
All right, the last thing we wanted to share, again, like Kirsten talked about, there is a number of resources on what she just shared, but one of the things that one of the resources we've come across is this group and this website called Color of Autism. They've been doing some really great town halls. So they've had 2 town halls. Kirsten, I'm not sure, do you know if any others are planned in the near future?
The others planned, but that's something we can share if we hear about.
If
we're going to take a little bit of a break from that, I think they said, but they've been really great for anyone that's been able to attend.
And their work is specifically for the Black autistic community. And they are 2 mothers that have just done incredible work, and they've got some great resources on their website as well. And one of the resources they do is something called Spectrum of Care. And you can go to their website and read a little bit about it, but there's not a lot of information. So Kirsten and I had a meeting with them on behalf of PACT the other day, just to hear a little bit more about Spectrum of Care, to hear what they do. So for any Black autistic family members of somebody with autism, they do a 6-week, is that right, Kirsten? 6 weeks? Yeah, 6-week course that really covers all aspects of autism. So it's an educational course, but from the Black autistic perspective, which I think is really critical. And again, that's not a perspective I have, but I know, the extra safety measures right now in 2020 that come with that, the perspective as well. A lot of their work has to do with the changes that you have to make in education. So, how you might have to advocate a little bit differently, how you might have to explain behavior a little bit differently. They've got that perspective, and they do this course. So the neat thing about the course is it's free of charge, but they just make it mandatory that you attend all. So they say they start with early intervention, and they touch on potty training, and they touch on education and advocacy and safety, all the way up through adulthood. And I think, again, I haven't sat through the course, but the founders of this organization, Kirsten and I have talked to, and they're both just incredible advocates for the community, and highly recommend. So you can fill out the form on the website if that's something you're interested in doing or getting involved in. And like I said, they've got some other resources, but this seemed to be the best one that was worth highlighting. And I think again, it's just important to say that, you've got that added, whether it's 2020 or whether it's not, we've got that added value and added measure when you do have autism and when you are someone that's Black. And we think that's important to talk about now. We think that's important to get specific resources and not just feel you've got to use everybody's resources. And then it's also important to get involved in community that has the similar challenges. And so this is one such community. There's quite a few different ones, but we highly recommend this group, and can connect you with them if you would like to be connected. Anything else to add on that one, Kirsten?
I think just thinking about the fact, it sounds like, and again, we haven't done the course ourselves, but it sounds like once you go through it, they're a support group with you. You're kind of part of their family after that. And so these women, Abby and I emailed them when they were receiving hundreds of emails, and they responded always within a day at the very most. So they seem like they're very connected. And I know for families out there, if you got connected with them, that they would help you navigate a variety of things. Just from working in the schools and seeing a lot of times that Black students' behavior is interpreted as just what I said, behavior problems, not necessarily autism, or understanding how autism is impacting a Black student. So thinking about, I think they'd help you with advocacy, understanding the education system, which can be really intimidating. I know a few of them are actually advocates that work in that group. So I think it's a really good resource, not just for the course itself, but for that lifelong connection. Because this intersectionality of having autism and being Black is really important. It always has been. I think it's just being really highlighted in 2020, and it should be a movement we keep highlighting. It's not just something that's here for a moment and then gone. So reach out if you have questions or you want us to connect you with them. We're happy to help.
So that wraps up what we had planned to talk to you all about today. We're more than happy to open it up for questions. I know we don't have a ton sitting with us today, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions, but also I can share this with everybody in the group afterwards. And then if any, questions come up in other groups, we're more than happy. We're here to support you. And, we're thankful for ASBG for getting our start originally, and for all the support you've always given us over the years, whether we've been in Lexington or Australia or all over the world now. And, Lexington is always our base and our home, and where we're able to, do a lot of our good work. And we're just really grateful for you, for the help and support you guys have given us.
I don't see any questions on Facebook at the moment. I've been monitoring it this whole time.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Abby and Kirsten, let me step in just briefly. I don't have any questions either. You had a great presentation. But I wanted to say that we are so proud to have had a part in supporting the start of what you're doing now. I know that we all feel that way. We're just really proud about that, and proud to have any kind of a connection with you. And we're still here. We're still here if you need any more support.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that. We're hoping our kind of next, what we've got our eyes on now is we want to, do kind of what we would call in the academic world a more rigorous study where we show the change that comes from our training, and the meet and greet aspect specifically, because there, from when we started, there's a lot more groups doing trainings, which is, really heartwarming. But our meet and greet aspect continues to be kind of one of the unique things that we do. So we believe that's critical. So we're hoping to get a big grant in the near future to do that across lots of different states. So where Kirsten is, and John Campbell, you might remember, is a part of our group as well. Yeah.
I think
Abby,
Yeah.
I do actually recall a question that the self-advocates posed at one point. This has not been posed right now, but the question was, when you do the meet and greets, how would we be able to have more police officers participate in those? Because for right now, it's been strictly on a voluntary basis. The officers just participate voluntarily. But where we're seeing the most brutality they're not the police officers who would participate in those. They're the police officers who would not. So is there any suggestion you have for remedying that situation?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Joe. I think we do them more and we do them more often. So I think that's the best way to, and when we were right after we trained originally Lexington, we were doing them every month. And then we would put it, when we'd notice a little bit of a lull, we'd put a few months, in between, and then we'd do it again. And that's when we started to see the most variety of people. And I had the most success getting more than just volunteers when I had Commander Wright. You might remember him. He was a wonderful advocate for us. And we saw him at a lot of our events because he would call on different people. He would just say, now you 5 are coming because I know you're on shift, and you 5. And, having that inside support was probably the only way we could do that. We're hoping, that's part of why we want to do research. We know research is wonderful, but research takes time, and we need it now. And I understand that, but we're hoping that by doing some sort of study, also we can show that, hey, it's the officers that are doing the training are benefiting, but the officers that are doing the training and going to the meet and greet now know community members, and they're benefiting at another level. And so, that's part of, we've got to use the tools that we've got when one of ours is, research. So that's part of what we're hoping to do. But I think my advice would be, just to get that inside man or inside lady that knows who to call on and that has the authority to do so. So we were so lucky to have Commander Wright, because he worked right under the chief at the time, so he could call on people and they would respond. Kirsten, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I was just thinking a lot about this idea that just becoming involved in like advocacy here in Georgia. What I'm trying to do is encourage parents to be advocates. So if you call up, I know Lexington is where a lot of you guys are, but continue to do it because it takes a lot of pressing of people. But I've been encouraging people here to call up their police departments and ask about autism training, because again, like Abby said, there's a lot of turnover in the police. So if you guys call and continue to advocate, I know parent advocates can do sometimes a lot more than these big organizations that have lobbyists. Just having a lot of parents on board, I know that takes work. Here to support you guys through that, but I think just having that advocacy of saying, okay, you had a one-time training, but is that good enough? I think continuing education is important, and having this like ongoing conversation. But like Abby said, a lot of it starts with research. So you kind of have to prove that what you did was effective, and then go from there. So I think once we would be able to kind of prove that, then hopefully some states mandate autism training, right? And they mandate continuing education. Kentucky's not one of them. Georgia's not one of them. But I think if that we could get to a level where, again, that's going to take advocacy, but if it was mandated, then everyone would have to go. And right, what if it wasn't just mandated, it was a 1-hour training, it was mandated that the community meet and greet part of it is really important. So I think thinking about advocacy is really important here. And again, I'm not like a lawyer or have any of that kind of work, but I think talking about how we can advocate on a state level is really important in this conversation too. And self-advocates too. I mean, I think encouraging self-advocates to advocate for this type of training is really important. It's really important work. So, that's not a definite answer, but hopefully that gives a start. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
First of all, I want to say again what Sarah said. Thank you guys for your work. And I can't believe we lost you. what would it take to get you to come back to Lexington? That's not my question. But you think about that. So you guys, the protests came right by my house. Like, they came right by my house. And the stories that, you know, started on the radio this year, and we don't even listen to like NPR in the car anymore. And of course we don't have drive time, but my 13-year-old is just like, again, and like his whole life has been stories of this terrible violence by the police. And he is not the only 13-year-old who's lived through this last period of time. And so when I think about what the solutions are, yes, absolutely, requiring the training is so important. And this might be a good time to get that at the state level as an important and necessary concession, because a lot of the Black victims in Kentucky have also been on the spectrum. I mean, like, we know that Black people are having these problems with the police, but the disability community is right there with them, and sometimes that's the same person.
Absolutely.
So when I think about this problem in a much bigger frame than Lexington, which seems to be trying so hard, you know, I think that what we need is a different form of crisis intervention, that we sort of use the police for everything else that doesn't have an agency or a department or a budget. And they are just guys, you know, they can only do so much. They have the capacity to arrest you, hurt you, maybe talk to you. If they feel safe to talk to you, then it's okay to talk to you. And then they still have to decide whether to arrest you or, you know, make you leave. I mean, they don't have any tools. And so when we look at places like Minneapolis, who are defunding and disbanding their police department, what's the ideal model for crisis intervention and public safety that would take our needs into consideration? And maybe nobody has an answer for that, but you all seem to be at the edge of where that work might happen. Internationally, we have this opportunity now to re-envision what we want going forward, and it's obviously not what we've got. And I personally, you know, like, haven't always paid my tags on time, and I've been pulled over for that a lot, and had an old car that never had both brake lights, and then, oh man, you know, like the red faded, and I got pulled over because my taillights were pink. And I've never felt physically endangered by that. But I don't think that that's everybody's experience. And I don't think it's even reasonable for us to pretend that it is. And I think that it's a situation that we've created by not finding another option.
Well, I think the one good thing that Kentucky was doing right when we were starting this work is what a lot of states were doing, which was crisis intervention training. And I think that's probably has a bit of a key to, you know, what needs to change. And I don't think we've done a good enough job with it yet. But the idea was that everybody, so while autism training isn't mandatory in Kentucky yet, this crisis intervention training is starting to be mandatory across the country, and it's new. So when I say it's new, I don't think that we can expect the benefit of it to be understood yet, but it's this training, and a lot of what they train overlaps with our work. And so, you know, part of our research in the future might be on comparing and contrasting our work with their work. But it's a lot of things like give extra time when you go and you're trying to decide, do you arrest or do you use physical force? Give people time to respond, understand mental health. There's a lot of mental health work in it. And that's why originally we didn't love the training, because it was focused on mental health. But then we learned about the strategies and how the strategies do overlap with the strategies we give, which are slow down, talk slowly, give time to respond, assume other things besides drug and violence, and all those, that's what they're being taught in crisis intervention training, and it is a very good training. So I would say, hopefully internationally, this policy brief that comes out and some of the other work that's starting to kick off that's a lot more rigorous will make the point that training's necessary. And then we can start to think, how do we train with our interests in mind, but also with other interests in mind? So like the mental health interests and the race interests. And I think so in the UK, in Europe, the trend is they've decided we can't push autism and mental health and other things. And while that makes me twinge a little bit, because this is my life's passion, what they are doing is they're gathering all the strategies together and teaching them all at once. So it would benefit the autism community. They're just not saying it's just for the autism community. And so I think that'll be a bit of an experiment for us. We'll get to keep an eye on how Europe's going and how UK is going with that sort of viewpoint, where they're doing kind of this more crisis intervention training that's a little bit global, a little bit more global, where they are just, again, pushing those techniques that are the stop, wait, think, before you use force or before you use violence or before you arrest. But I think, I think unfortunately, I have to be honest about where we're at, and we're at the very beginning of the research in this topic, and that's a hard thing to stomach, knowing that we're at the end and in the middle of the violence and the aggression, and we're at a very challenging time. But unfortunately, no one started, when I started researching this, when I started doing this work, there was nothing. Part of Kirsten's dissertation work was on like really digging and finding everything you can find so that she could understand kind of what had already been studied. And there were 2 studies on trainings worldwide that were of any sort of quality, and they were of poor quality, to be honest, but they were, there was only 2. And so when you look at something like mental health training, or when you think about autism research in general, we've got a long ways to go. And I think the important thing is that we're staying on it and staying with it and making sure we progress it, and that kind of thing. But I think, it's a good point. I don't have an easy answer. I think we just have to acknowledge where we're at, which is at the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Adding to that non-easy answer, I think if you think, I know in Fayette County, they added a lot of school resource officers, rather than thinking about adding like mental health supports to schools, when there's no research that supports that resource officers have good responses. And a lot of those times, I know some of the people that are here in this room have been directly impacted by how their children are treated at school. And so thinking again about how a resource officer might respond to your child, versus, especially if there's no research on that, versus where are the counselors, where are the therapists that are able to teach your child skills in school, which is where they are. And I know that's not exactly what you were thinking about, but I think school resource officers is where schools are, where our kids are a lot of the time. And so if we teach them that you can respond with force, that's a problem. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Kristen, I just had something to say about what you were saying about therapists in the school.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant idea. What I've come across is that people who are trained in mental health are not necessarily trained in how to respond to a nonverbal person.
Yes.
So like with my son, finding anybody to do something like play or talk therapy has been, it just hasn't been something we could do. So I think one of the things that you might consider is, okay, if we're going to ask mental health professionals to be in the school systems rather than resource officers, how can we give them support in knowing how to work with our nonverbal students, in helping them express their emotions, or at least understand their emotions, and that those emotions are valid.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I think you kind of hit on something, Joe, that we don't always talk about. There's a lot of a lot of times I have nonverbal children that I send to a speech pathologist that has no idea where to start or how to progress. And I didn't even think about what you're saying in the schools. Yeah, that definitely happens. And I think a lot of people that I know that are psychologists in the schools are really spread thin. And so having more people too to be able to have these specialties is a great start. I'll definitely kind of take that idea with me wherever I go. So I think that's a good point, just thinking about what are those specialties, and also teacher training with that, but that's a whole nother topic for another night. But I think we can also think about advocacy with this question I was asked at the beginning, is think about, I've done some digging to figure out Atlanta's police budget compared to all the other budget, compared to other things like education. Some of this work has been made public on the internet, but I encourage you guys to go look that up. What is Lexington's police budget compared to education, compared to public funds, compared to early intervention? Because in Atlanta, it's completely atrocious thinking about early intervention funds compared to police funding. And I think a lot about like health disparities for the Black community because of that, which has a really long lasting impact. So again, it's not like a clean answer, but there's a lot of ways we could think about it. And thanks, Joe, for that point. I think it's a great one to keep in mind.
I think that what she said was important. I think that speech therapists have a better chance than psychologists. I know that most of the time when I call a psychologist and get their voicemail, it says, if you are having a crisis, call 911. Yeah. So at least around here, they're all too fast to like hand it off. But yeah, we don't really have a picture of what that person who was trained in like de-escalation, when you do your research, de-escalation research is pretty good. Mm-hmm. I don't think we should have school resource officers with guns in schools. I don't think that they had guns when I was in school. I don't remember that. I think that came a little later, and I think it's just a huge mistake. Mm-hmm. But I think that now is the time to say this is not how we want to handle teaching good behavior in our little social incubator, which is what our schools are. This is how we recreate our culture, is through schooling. And
right,
necessarily want it to be, grow up under armed guard. That's just not the answer. But I don't know what the right answer is. So I am paying really close attention to what I can find that's coming out of Minneapolis. When they say no more police, they say a public safety department. Is that 7 or 8 departments, and how do they work? And I think that I hope that as our kids come out of this pandemic and they get to create the world that they want to live in, which is going to be so different than the world that we grew up in, that that they have like bigger ideas. So I wanted to ask, and I'll stop because these are too many questions from one person, but when you say it benefits officers, the training benefits officers, how are you defining the benefits? Is that
our training? Yeah. That's a great question. So far, our work, and this is what I'll pop up on the website within the next week or so, hopefully. So far, our work has shown an increase in knowledge, an increase in confidence. So a lot of my work is in self-efficacy too. So it's just whether or not an officer even goes into a situation thinking they can interact with somebody with autism, because my work has focused on that in teachers and in officers. So I'm under the belief that if officers are going into this situation, even having these beliefs that they can't to begin with, that no matter what I teach them, it's not going to help. So my work's been in making sure they have that belief that they can, and can do things like communicate, understand, talk with someone that's nonverbal, all those kind of things. So we've shown a change in that. We've shown a change in knowledge, a change in confidence, and then just overall, like open response options from officers where we just said, is this helpful, or kind of was this just another PD that you had to go to? So we've had really positive responses from that as well. But then in this next study that, you know, we're hoping that it'll be a bit bigger and we'll need to get some funding for, we're going to do some tracking of police behavior. So to see what behavior change comes from the training. So, you know, if before they had an interaction with somebody with autism and they were always sending them to the hospital, or they were always just, you know, calling on somebody else because they didn't know what to do. But then after the training, were they sitting with them for an hour and trying to de-escalate at the site? That would be a change in behavior that we would expect after our training. So we'll do a little bit more in-depth tracking of that behavior. So that's in the future, but for now we've shown knowledge, confidence, self-efficacy, and then just kind of overall satisfaction with the training.
So one of the things that I wanted to say is in regards to the psychology in the school and having those therapists on hand and everything, is there is a speech therapist, speech pathologist, and she will be working with the school system here this coming year. Her name is Katie Goldie, and she might be a good person to contact in regards to some of the ways that can be implemented in the school system.
Okay, can you connect or send me her name or something afterwards, Jo?
Yeah, sure, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, her
That'd be
name is
great.
Katie
Thank you.
Goldie, but yeah, I can send you
I
I can send you some information about her.
Yeah, and we get contacted by awesome people all the time. I just did a phone call last week with another speech therapist. When you started to say that, I wondered if it was her. It's not. It's a different one. But same thing. She wanted to just get involved with trainings, and she said, you know, since I'm going to be a therapist in the area, I want to, you know, make sure I'm involved with police. So I think, you know, the more we talk about this, the more we can find people like that. And that's the model that Kirsten and I envision for PACT. And again, we've got a long way to go still in the work that we're doing, but, you know, we want our materials to be used by people like Katie or like other people that are in the town and immersed in that community. Because then, like you said, it's not just going to be people showing up that are volunteering for things, but they're going to be able to pull certain officers or certain schools or do work kind of where the problem is, as opposed to just doing work, you know, with this wonderful society who we know all of you are, you know, doing the right thing. We can kind of get our breath a little bit longer and wider when we include more local individuals and individuals that have already invested in the community as well, which is why, you know, we were able to do such good work with you guys to begin with.
I like that so many people have brought up these issues in school, because I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but I think it's hitting the mainstream now. But the school to prison pipeline, a lot of this work and a lot of the mass incarceration really starts in how people are treated in the schools, especially Black students. And personally, from working in a variety of schools in Lexington, I've seen it firsthand. And I know that probably some of you guys have. So I think also the work that you guys are doing, and a lot of you guys are just supports to so many families in the area, and teaching them about their rights, and maybe even being advocates with families, because there's so many meetings like manifestation determination meetings, for example, that don't go right because families don't necessarily know what their rights are. And a lot of times kids being expelled, kids with disabilities being expelled for things that could have been handled differently, like with working with someone like Katie Goldie, or with having like a training with the police. So there are other things that can be done. And I think, unfortunately, it takes a squeaky wheel. And so thank you guys for being supports for people in the community, because I think a lot of people, especially people of color, necessarily haven't been given the same kind of rights in schools. And it is their right, but they haven't been given the same information a lot of times. So I'm thinking about a lot of Spanish-speaking families I work with, and trying to connect with them with educational advocates, and how can we do that work. So again, I could go on and on, but thank you for bringing up all those great points.
It's a really huge learning curve, going from being a parent to thinking about a manifestation and determination hearing. I don't even know what that means, and I've got a master's in admin.
Yeah.
You know, so like there's just a huge learning curve to even understand like what interventions can do and how that changes behavior and how long that takes for parents to advocate. You know, it's you and 12 other administrators in a room, and they know what they want and they know what they're willing to do before you walk in there. And they know what all these things mean. And it, even if you know your rights,
Yes.
you know the system, it's a huge amount of information to parse. Hi, Alva.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
You're so right. Absolutely. And I can even say from, you know, from my perspective, from being in this field and being a sibling, I'm still taken advantage of by administrators and by schools. I've told Kirsten a little bit about, I've been advocating for my brother since he's 21. We've wanted one more year under his IEP so he can have support in his school. He's doing like a tech program, and he's from Cincinnati. And I have had to have because I'm in Australia, 3 a.m. IEP meetings with my mom. We're now on our 4th round, and we're about to put a complaint into the school because they've been saying things like, he can now join the job market. He can be a typical function. And we're going, what? He's had an IEP for 21 years, and you're just suddenly going to tell me he's cured and doesn't need support anymore. And it's, and again, they do the same thing to me, you know, throw words around.
Correct. And then it's supposed to be your opinion, and then you have to use their data to support your opinion.
Yeah. So I can empathize with you, and I can say it happens to all of us, if you know, if not us more. And I do also want to say, just, you know, for the perspective of others, I think Kirsten and I want to make it clear too, we believe strongly in the power of family advocates and self-advocates, but we also understand that that's not everybody's calling to, and our goal can be to, you know, link you with someone that is, you know, Mel, as everybody knows, has been the resource for so many, and you guys have been the resource for so many, because, you know, that's the path that she's chosen and that others have chosen. But we also understand just choosing the path of your family too.
Yes.
And knowing that that's enough, because it's I you know, I'm not a parent, and I'm not a parent of a child with autism, and I just know that that's hard work in itself too, and I think I want to acknowledge that perspective too. All right, well, yes, Sarah, I'll send you the PowerPoint with the resources, and you know, as always, even though we're not in Lexington, we're here. We're with you all, and you know, just reach out if you need anything in the future. And yeah, we appreciate everything you guys have done.
Sarah.
I mean, we appreciate what you do, and if there's
Yes.
any way that we can help, you know, I understand funding. I mean, if you need it, you may be above where we can help now, but if there's any way we can, I mean, if you, we have funds too, and
Thanks. Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, yeah. Thank you.
Can you all hear me?
yes, go Alva.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
Alva.
I just wanted to say to Abby and the other presenter, Kirsten, that as an African-American parent of an autistic child, I am just so thrilled to hear your presentation tonight. I have struggled with what to say to people who have asked me what they can do and what it all looks like. And I really had a hard time kind of framing my feelings about everything to really, I question whether people really understood the uniqueness of an African-American child who is also autistic. And I definitely want to sign up for the classes of the group that you talked about. And I'm going to go on. I came on late to this Zoom tonight, but I'm going to look at the video, and then I absolutely would like to sign up. But I want to applaud you all and thank you so much, because I absolutely believe that silence is complicit. You're complicit with it as well. And that it's going to take all of us doing this together in order to move past these racial injustices that are so obvious now. So I just wanted to thank you very much, and
Thanks,
know that I'm
Alva.
going to work towards, I'm going to investigate what you've presented further and see how I can share that information. Thank you.
Thank you, and reach out if you need anything as you take on that process. It shouldn't, like you said, it takes a village, and it shouldn't just be all work that you have to do by yourself. So we're here if you
Yes.
need kind of support with that for sure, or anyone else in your community or beyond, anyone listening to this.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I'll get your information.
Yeah, Sarah,
Yeah,
thanks so much for letting us come on. And you were talking about funds, and I was just thinking all this work wouldn't have been possible without you guys and your support in the beginning. So thank you guys so much for everything you did to support us from the beginning.
Kirsten, you probably weren't on when I said it earlier, but that's one of our biggest points of pride, that we were able to do something to help you guys get a start in the wonderful work you do.
Oh, well, thank you. And
Like, seriously, we talk about that, Kirsten.
And we talk about you guys still to this day. I'm like, if only these people in Georgia lived in Lexington, maybe they want to move up there. But thanks for all of your work, and continue this fight. I know it's hard, and we're here for you guys from a distance. And thanks for giving us some time to talk with you tonight and share resources.
Well, and we will let you go. I know we're at our quitting time, but as Lissa said, we welcome you guys to move back. We're open to that. But I'm excited by the sound of the African American Moms Group, and I don't know if you think it would be possible for them to present for us at a meeting. I mean that.
Well, I do think, yeah, and I'll chat with you on the side about it, Sarah. But yeah, part of what we talk to them about is, you know, they're stretched so thin, but they have a wide group of peer resources now, and I thought about, you know, we might be able to put a proposal together and invite one of them to come in. A lot of they take funding support on the side for a lot of their groups. So I thought maybe, yeah, we can talk about a donation for their group and how, and then invite somebody in to speak. So I'll talk to you about it. But yeah, I think they would be an incredible resource in even just coming to one of your meetings.
Yeah.
I'm also curious about training, if they do trainings to actually to duplicate a similar kind of thing in this area.
So they do, and they know people who do as well. So I think Alva, if you reach out to Kirsten or I, and we can give you the names of the leaders, and kind of give you a guide as to how to, you know, what steps to take, and we can get you started at least. But I think I know. Right. Was it Kirsten? Was it their group that was doing the trainings, or was it somebody else? Was that Dr. Burns?
They were like they were having conversations more on a community level, but we even talked about, I think it's a point that's important to raise, is a lot of times groups of people of color are asked to do this work with no compensation, or just expected to do this type of work. So Abby and I talked a lot about getting a grant that would also include, you know, the perspective of Black autistic lives, because I think just having us come in and speak on behalf of it as two white women it just doesn't do enough. And so we've talked to them about how we can partner with some of their partners or them to kind of make the training more comprehensive that we're doing.
But we want to make sure compensation
is not just taking their ideas and, you know, checking it off that we met with them and moving on. So I think that's important as well.
Sarah, we might be able to look at some joint things, joint funding towards bringing them here. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. And do you think one of their goals is to establish sort of a quote unquote chapters in other areas? Do you think that they are you know, since they're stretched thin, if they are sort of training up individuals in other areas, maybe those people could speak
probably.
And that's what I was actually speaking of, training us to be like them.
To do their work,
to do their work, to expand on it,
And Alva, I would say too, so that spectrum of care, so like they said, originally it was in their community, and then COVID happened, so they got to go virtual. And so what they were saying to us is, you know, the benefit of virtuals, it doesn't matter where you are, you can attend our training, and then you can become, which is what I hear you talking about. So then, you know, Alva, if you sat through their training, then you could become the voice for ASBG, and, you know, making sure you share those kind of resources.
Yes, I would love to do that. Yes.
With us. So I think that's a great idea. But there's lots of potential. We can think about it. And
I think that's very exciting.
Yes, it is. Wow.
All right. Well, if no one else has any questions.
Glad I got back on. Yay.
Yeah, I'm glad to see you, Alva. I was checking the list to make sure you had. So
yes, good. Thank you.
We were talking about some really good stuff. So
yes. Everything, the COVID, everything. And also the social stories, everything you guys said is really on point and powerful. Thank you.
And Alva, let us know if you do get connected with the group, we can help you with that, but also let us know how we can support that work as well, even if you take that spectrum of care, what you thought about it. I have a lot of families that could benefit from it, but I don't know anyone that's done it yet, so I'd be helpful to hear your perspective on how it went, so I can kind
Okay.
of share that news.
Absolutely. Okay. I'll
Thank
get you my number so that we can communicate. That'd be great.
you. Okay.
That would be awesome. Yeah, that would be great. Abby, what do you have?
This is Miles.
Oh,
This is my
goodness.
10-month-old.
Oh, so pretty. What
Say hi.
He always makes that appearance at the end.
Yeah, he always say hi at the end. He's been sleeping.
You
Say
should call
hi.
it the ensign.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, he is a beautiful.
We're all bundled up because it's cold here today. We're in
Oh.
winter.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what are your highs, your average highs, really quick? I know.
Well, the highs aren't bad. They're like 65. But the lows, like in the mornings, it'll be like 35, 40. So, yeah, it's just for a little while. It doesn't last long here.
Now, I missed the opening. Where are you?
Australia.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, oh my gosh.
So I've got family, and I was in Lexington for a long time, family in Ohio, and then Australia. So we split our time. And I said,
Okay.
COVID, we're here.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So it's about 11 there now? 11?
Yeah. 10:30. Yep.
10:30, 10:30. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much to both of you. Kirsten, remind me how to pronounce your last name. I asked you at the last meet and greet and promptly forgot it.
My name is Shile, but my married name is Rayleigh, like Bailey, but with an R. So Kirsten Rayleigh.
That's right. That's right. But Shile, I never can remember. Okay.
Oh, I say it rhymes with smile. So that's a good one.
Yes, you told me that then, but
I'll repeat it. No worries. I respond.
it doesn't work for me. All right. Okay.
Thank you guys.
All right. See you guys.
Right.
Nobody else has questions. We'll let you go. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yes.
Y'all have a good night.
Thanks. You
Thank
too.
you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. All
Yeah,
right.
thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Sarah. This was wonderful. Thanks, Mel. Wow.
Yeah. Lissa, you have great questions. I was glad you were there.
Oh man, I could so keep talking. Like,
Mm.
what is our policy initiative? When are we going to send a letter? Like, now is the time. We missed the Lexington police contract is closed, I guess, tomorrow,
Oh, wow.
the 30th. Like,
Mm.
we need to make our demands. Like, there's this protest happening, but, it is when our demands have a complicated foundation and we have some research directions to guide the answers, like now's the time that we have to say we need statewide training for autism. And it is, according to my research of the reading, it is the higher functioning individuals who are less likely to have a solid diagnosis in hand who are